there was a patient who actually was a Russian-speaking patient. She had this cognitive disorder and all this. She was shouting a lot, and nobody understood what she was saying. So I went to her and she was like, "Ну, наконец-то, кто-то говорит по-русски. Давай, я хочу вода хочу." So she was just saying, "Oh, finally somebody understand me. Give me some water now."
Welcome, everybody, to a new exciting episode of the Connected by Language podcast, the only show that finds the most dedicated language learners out there and tries to learn from the craft. I'm your host, Michele, and I'm joined by my co host,
Michelle.
So, for the people that are joining in for the first time, I think it would be very nice for us to kind of give us a little bit of an introduction about ourselves, where we're from, what languages do we speak, and what we're all about.
Yeah, so I'm from Germany. I speak German, English, French, Spanish, and a bit of Brazilian Portuguese.
A roster of languages, if I say so myself.
Yeah, that's actually why I'm a language education specialist at Tandem.
And what is Tandem?
So Tandem is a language exchange app. You can exchange languages with people from all over the world, either in one-on-one conversations or in language parties, which are live audio rooms.
And there are over 300 different languages supported on Tandem. So no matter what kind of objective you're looking for, whether you're trying to get the speaking conversation like better, or you wanted to just find some international friend to just chill and share memes with, you will always find the perfect language partner for any need. And you may find someone like me. Hi, my name is Michele. I come from Italy. I speak Italian, French, English, a little bit of German, and a little bit of Japanese. And I just love talking to people from all over the world to learn about different cultures, different languages, and different ways that people find this wonderful world of languages and how it changed their life. And the name of the podcast is Connected by Language. And when was conceived, it was more about like people trying to find some more, I guess, philosophical connections with people, friendship or getting to see the way of the life with a different lens. But today we're also going to focus on something a little bit more practical, because one of the scariest thing that sometimes when you're like entering to a new country or, being an expat is the doctor's office. Yeah. It can be very scary. You don't know what's going on. You are afraid of not being able to say what you want to say. So having somebody that can speak your language is a nice relief, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So today we're going to focus on that, understanding the world of connecting to people through the power of medical language. But also we're going to look on how can you create from that love and from that need of the medical language gaps, and you can create an entire community of language learners out of nowhere. So today we're gonna welcome to the show Jonatan, a Swedish doctor. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hey, hello, hola,
Hello.
привет, salam, ahlan,
Okay.
see ya. So that's some of the languages I speak to say
One
hi.
after the other, one already off to a great start, off to like coming in hot. But again, welcome to the show. We're very excited to see about what your very interesting and unique journey is. Honestly, I'm very excited. I can hardly contain myself. I would really want to jump straight into the world of medicine because it's a very, very, very important topic for a lot of people. But before we go to that direction, I think it would be nice, just like we did at the beginning of our episode, to kind of, if you can give us a little bit of a personal journey and what you're all about.
So my name is Jonatan Heile. In Swedish we say Jonatan, and there's different ways of pronouncing my name in other languages. But anyways, I was born here in Sweden, in northern Sweden, and my parents are from Eritrea. So as a child, I had two different languages at home, both Swedish and Tigrinya. And it's an interesting story how I got into languages, because as a child, I was actually not the language person. I had a 2 year older sister, and she was much more extroverted than me. When I was a child, I was a bit introverted, and I was in my own world and dreaming, daydreaming, all this, like a philosopher. And that also made her, she was speaking more. So when our relatives came to speak to us in Tigrinya, she would be obviously speaking much more than me. And then they thought that, well, I'm not the language person, because she was a language person and then I was something else. So math was my thing in school also. So I got that label. I thought that languages is not my thing. But today it's completely the opposite. So it's interesting.
You'd be surprised how many people have the same exact mentality. So if you ever think that you're never a language person, the chances are you just haven't found the right stimuli yet. So it would be very nice to know like what exactly changed about from this like beginning.
Yeah. So we go further. When I was 12 years old, we in Sweden we could choose another language apart from English that we learned early on in school, and we could choose between Spanish, French, and German. And for me, it was very easy to choose Spanish because the teacher, his name was Lars. It was a very, if you look at him, you would think that's a very typical Swedish person. But when he spoke, it was completely opposite. He was like a Spanish person with all this passion when he spoke and character and joking and like talking loud. It was like this amazing energy he had. So I thought, I want to learn Spanish. And that was the best thing I did. I had really fun on every class with him. And yeah, it was all of a sudden words were just a fun thing to play around with, learning a language. And I found out that it was easy for me to remember the words. And I had a guy in my class. His name was a friend. His name was Robert, and we used to make up like uh, w- words that didn't really exist, a bit silly words, this typical thing you would do. And he would get so tired of us, and he was exhausted, and he was always laughing to, with us. And then he said one day, Jonathan and Robert, you are exactly the same. The only difference is that you, Jonathan, you remember all those words that you're inventing. And then I understood that
Oh.
maybe languages is something that I'm also think I can be really good at, or maybe even I really enjoy it. And the interesting thing about this was that as my Spanish became my favorite subject in school, all of a sudden my Tigrinya got much better. Yeah.
So it
So
was
that was very interesting for me to see, like, maybe it's not about being a language person or not. Maybe something else is much more deeper than what we believe when we are labeling ourselves or labeling each other of who is what.
Yeah, it's definitely like I feel like when it comes to understanding languages, it is much deeper than just like a language at school or like a book that you have to get a grade on. And I think that's one of the main frustration that a lot of people have about the education system is that they really treat it as like just one of the other exams that you have to take on, and that like sort of advantage doesn't like you kind of have to find your own way to make it entertaining because I have not a similar story to your fake question. Sorry, fake question, fake words. Because I would love to learn more about fake words. I prepare maybe a couple of examples for later. There's always ways to make yourself entertaining. I don't know if you guys have any like fun language games or techniques that I've used in the past or
I mean, for me, it wasn't really techniques or games. It was more dancing. But for
dance.
me, it was also Spanish, like for you, Jonathan.
Mhm.
So I didn't really plan to like learn speaking and like knowing more for Spanish. But then I went full into like salsa and bachata and like everything is in Spanish there. Some reggaeton too, and that's like how I got more into this language. And I wanted to know what the lyrics meant and what the people were talking about, like what the figures, like the names of the figures in dancing were all about. So this is how it started for me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think like music can get a very big
Yeah.
part on learning languages. Like for me personally, like whenever people are asking me, "Oh, can I learn Italian through songs?" I always tell them just because it's for dialect reasons, and like most of the time the modern songs tend to be much more like focused on specific slang or specific regional dialects. But for Spanish, it's a very common thing. And I would like to ask you, maybe Jonathan, if you had a similar experience with Spanish music, maybe.
Oh, yes, I do. So for me, as I said about my childhood as being a bit shy, language in the Spanish language and also music, I found my passion through that because I was playing guitar as a child and also used to sing a lot in choirs. And I found an artist that was my favorite artist when I was around that age, 12 too. And his name was Björn Afzelius. And he died around that year when I started to hear about him. And I used to perform his songs on every 2 times a year, like when we finish school, like before Christmas and before summer. There's always people who used to sing in front of all the students, and I was one of those. And I was always singing his songs, and he was actually a lot of times in Latin America, and some of his songs were taken from an artist called Silvio Rodriguez, a Cuban artist, a troubadour, singer songwriter, and that also got me into Cuban music and this troubadour with the guitar and singing. And those songs were very like the lyrics were very deep and complex and poetic. So my vocabulary got much better because I was combining the music and the learning songs by heart with words that you learn more than normal words that you maybe wouldn't use in your daily life. So that was like potentiating both of these things. The Spanish language and the music together really made it, really improved my Spanish and made it much more fun to even go into a new world, because that's what I was doing. I was coming to a new world through the language and music.
Yeah, it's very interesting knowing this. This happened in other like episodes as well, because I personally have a pretty tough time relating to lyrics in general for music. When I love music, but I usually like the instrumental side, the technique style, not necessarily the music. And going from a different language must sound a lot harder. So I wanted to like kind of ask you a little bit. Do you think that you were like learning this like, were you entering this lyrical worlds and understanding these lyrical content pretty fast, or did it take time to actually starting to actually relate to the lyrics, in your opinion?
It's a very interesting question, because when it comes to learning a language, uh, music has always been like my entrance into the language. And I also usually try to find an artist that would be a symbol for that. And usually, an artist maybe who focus a lot of lyrics and is has an importance in the culture. And that's actually what draws me into the language and the lyrics. So yes, it's and it's also connected, because when I can sing in that language, those words would stick to me longer than if I would just memorize it as like a couple of words as it is, because it has another meaning. And when it's in a song, you get everything included. You don't have to study grammar, because it should be correct grammar. Or sometimes in songs
Mhm.
it's like a bit different than
Yes.
it is. But yes, it depends on on the the type of music and the lyrics that it is. But you get a lot of expressions. You can get uh, different words that express things, and the emotional side of it, I think that's the biggest part, because when we are learning through something that's connected to our emotions, for me, music has this really strong connection with my emotions. And also being able to perform and sing it, it's like doubles up the learning, I think.
Yeah, super interesting. I can totally relate to that. I mean, learning languages with music and this relation to your emotions really, really helps to like remember them. So that's a really good way to go. Now we talked a lot about the artistic side of music, of language learning, and it would be interesting for us to know a bit more about the professional side of languages and using your languages. So, as a doctor, how is it for you when you find language barriers with your patients? Like, what does it make in the difference how you treat or how people are treated?
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting, very important, interesting topic. I before telling about this, I want to say that I was living abroad after high school. I went to Spain to study like history and language and all this. And then I also studied medical school abroad in Hungary for 6 years. So I did the medical school in English, and I've seen the language barriers from both sides, because the international students that studied with me in Hungary, most of them never even learned Hungarian, despite being there for 6 years. It's a very common thing among the international students in general, because they could speak English to each other. So I was one of the few who actually learned Hungarian fluently. So I could really see the difference in the way we could even understand each other, because they would actually ask for me to translate for the other medical students when talking to a patient. But besides, when I came back to Sweden to work as a doctor, I've seen it too. Um, and I can really see how big difference it makes, because you go from being patient doctor to two human beings meeting each other and connecting simply because of talking to them in their native language. And that's a thing that it can never, I mean, I see this also in my daily life. If I speak to a person in a language that he didn't, or that person didn't expect me to speak. But this is much more powerful when you are a patient and suddenly somebody understands you just by showing how they understand you through the language. And that is very special in a unique situation, I think.
It's interesting because like there's a lot of ways to like understand if a doctor knows a certain amount of languages, but the problem is that most of the time he can't like you can't when you go into a doctor, you're selecting a doctor, you're booking an appointment. It cannot be specifically known what type of language do you speak. So my question becomes like, do you tend to tell them already in advance that you speak their language, or like can you understand them immediately what kind of language they're speaking? Or is it like more of like a surprise where they're not expecting you to know the language and they're just surprised and the situation changes? Like, what in practice, how does that look?
That's a very good question too. I first of all, about hearing and guessing which language they speak, I think I'm quite good at it because of the music and hearing different accents. Once I could spot that a doctor that was talking to me at a conference actually had Hungarian origin. Not because her Swedish was bad, because she was really good in Swedish, but I could hear the some of the tones or sounds, how she was pronouncing the words. So actually, I just started to speak to her in Hungarian. I was correct, and she was saying like, "How come you know? How would you know that I'm from Hungary? Is my Swedish that bad? So it was not the case. But I was just trying to say like, no, I'm very good at languages, and like I'm good at hearing different patterns of the words, like intonation and everything. And then I just switched into the Hungarian language to try to connect on that one. But it can be a sensitive thing, right? And it also can be a sensitive thing to just, like, when you label somebody and ask where you're from, instead of trying to connect who they are really. And also languages can also be very um, politicized. Like it also depends on if that person really, what does that person think about when they think about that language. It can connect it to a culture or connect it to anything that maybe not only good, it could be something bad too. So I mean, I've seen that too with Russian language. So I don't assume that people who speak Russian would be wanted to speak Russian to me, even though they also can speak that language. So it's very complex. But I also always try to focus on, if they speak to me, if they speak Swedish, I don't need to switch into their language unless it's a big plus. But in certain situations, you can also lose your connection if you go to another direction. I don't know if you understood what I tried to say. That if it answered your question.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so because it happens like to other people too, not only in the doctor patient situation, but if you like really want to practice the language or if you think you're already quite good at it and want to like use it in the country where you live in, and then people switch back to English, you can get really annoyed. Like so this can worsen your relation. Yeah.
Yes, it can, and it. I also try to focus. I've learned a lot about that. When I'm there, I am not in the center. The patient is in the center.
Yeah.
So unless it really helps, the interaction helps them to gain like everything, connection, all things, I would do it. But I wouldn't do it just to show off or just to try to gain
Prove.
some. I mean, it's good. You can gain some extra points, obviously, when they like what you're saying, and I mean that you understand them, you can connect on language. But it depends very much on situation. If it's a emergency, or if you're sitting together talking about some things, and it's a bit more like common sense and like how
Mm.
you value the situation, the social skills. But yes, I also tried. Sometimes I just ask like, which language do you speak? I've learned also that thing can be good, because if there's a language they speak but they don't really like, maybe they won't say it. But anyways, I think the most important is that the focus is on the patient and trying to help them. But yes, I've been in many times when it's actually had a really, most of the time it's had a positive effect when I speak to them in their language.
Yeah, but the point of being like understanding where you have to switch a language, I think that's a point that doesn't get that much explored because, like 9 times out of 10, people are very passionate about their language learning. They always talk about it. They would like to get as many opportunities to speak the language. And I think medical, when even though it is a place where you would want to speak to a language that you can give as much more detail about your situation as possible because it's pretty serious. I never really thought about people not wanting to switch languages. So that was kind of like eye opening because for me it was like, oh, I mean, of course I'm gonna switch to a language that I'm more comfortable in, but it's not all
Yes.
that like now that I think about it, it's like, oh, do you want to do that though? Because what about if the doctor part? I mean, you're probably your language skills are probably phenomenal, but in general, like I think it could be pretty fair to assume that a doctor might want to be able to speak to you in a certain language, but maybe they don't. They cannot fully relay the details of the medical space. Like for example, if you were to do speaking in Spanish, like if a doctor were to speak in Spanish to me and my Spanish was not that good, I would think that some of the fake words that you make the school were actually like parts of the human bodies. So, so there's definitely like a time and a place. That's the play.
Yeah,
That's
but
interesting.
it's interesting because what language does, it, as I said earlier, that it really takes you away from being the doctor patient and you connect, you come not only connect, you come closer to each other. And I've seen funny situations about that too happening when once there was a patient who actually was a Russian speaking patient. She was older and she had some cognitive maybe disorder and all this with her age, and she was shouting a lot and nobody understood what she was saying. So I went to her and she was like, ну наконец-то кто-то говорит по-русски, давай, я хочу вода хочу. So she was just saying, oh, finally somebody understand me, give me some water now. So I was not really the like, it's not it can actually, it's interesting how actually languages makes us
Like
to, yeah,
like
be
it
two people.
changed. It like changed also the type of tone. Like it, since he assumed that you were like a Russian speaker, it could be a little bit more loose, a little bit more comfortable, and like, oh, give me some water, or was it like not like a specific because it makes me think like, oh, did he completely change attitude when changing
Yeah,
the
so this was a special case because maybe she had some like dementia or something like this, but that was not diagnosed. But it was interesting to see how actually language, we express ourselves in different ways in in our native language, and especially we can get older and maybe we lose some part of the language we have, and it's more part of us, our own native language, right? You can express yourself freely, and maybe it also comes back some memories of what the language connects to you, to the family, to how you are. But I found it very interesting in different situations how languages actually, we are different in our different languages, you
yeah.
could say.
And but I think also like not it's not only that just like I think a matter of like relatability, but also like technical aspects of the language because medical lingo can be quite difficult. It's I think one of the most I don't want to say unapproachable, but definitely one of the most I guess higher echelon type of talk when it comes to like technical talk because I don't think you can use the same exact word like you cannot just use the English version of a part of the body or a cell type or like of a disease. So it's interesting that you also a little bit before the show, as a little birdie told me before the show, that you've been somewhat involved in that aspect of the language medical scene, like not only the relationship part, but also like the actual like I guess the actual tools to help these patients. Can you tell us a little bit more about your involvement that you had with the app Care to Translate?
Yeah. So I found out that there's an app called Care to Translate that's used by not only doctors but also nurses and people working in ambulance in all settings where they meet patients, and it can be also used for patients. So it's using medical translations that are verified, medical translations in many different languages that you can find, and so because using Google Translate is maybe not as safe you would expect, because you want the words to be correct, because some medical words need, I mean, you need to know exactly what you're referring to, obviously. And I found this topic very interesting, so I contacted them. And I actually, because of my background as a medical doctor and also a language enthusiast and polyglot, and I used to go to, I've been to the polyglot conference, the polyglot gathering, that is once a year, and I had a presentation actually about this topic, about language barriers in healthcare, where I spoke about this topic and about the app. So
Yeah,
yes.
it's interesting to see like the actual in and outs of this, because we had a previous episode with the NGO Clear Global, where they actually explained something very interesting about the world of medical for like the app itself, like probably supports a lot of different languages, but one of their big efforts was to take all of these extremely important diseases and like medical aspect from Wikipedia and updating them to very remote languages in the African community. Now, these remote languages, at first you would think like, oh man, like nobody's gonna use these like languages that like barely anybody speaks, or at least they're not gonna be access to the internet. And that's kind of like a massive problem, because there's so many different communities that are in dire need of help, and they cannot get access to resources to do even the most basic medical aspect. They would receive like a way like to treat the flu in like in Spanish when they're like in the middle of like Central Africa, and you were like, what are we supposed to do here? So, and
Yeah.
the power of languages in the world of medical, it's not just like, oh, it's just about connecting to a patient. It actively saves lives. It actively like makes a massive difference. And it's so nice to see that there's a very enthusiastic people that are taking this to the actual, like bare bones stuff, and actually contributing to this information knowledge. Because if there's one type of information that I think people about languages should be really careful about, is medical stuff. It is
Yeah.
technical stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see maybe also from your experience how like healthcare as a whole also underestimates what language is about and how important it is. I think maybe with some use cases from your own experience. You already told us the story about the Russian speaking lady. Yeah, so how is it as a whole?
Yes, well, as we talked about language and how it's about connecting to the patient, which actually has a powerful tool there, because um, once you speak to them in their language, they would also feel relief. You can really see it when somebody finally feels that, oh, somebody understands me, and you get more information about the symptoms, the anamnesis, right? And it actually, we know that having language barriers for patient has some consequences that we see, that it might prolong their stay in the hospital or risk for misdiagnosis, and also the compliance, that maybe as you don't connect because you don't understand each other, they maybe not understand what the doctor tried to, importance of the treatment and all this. And well, usually what the healthcare usually measures the success in like the diagnosis and treatment, but it's very hard to measure the thing about connecting to a patient and seeing if it really adheres to the treatment, which is something you maybe see afterwards. There actually been a study about that, and actually presented on the polyglot gathering, about a study that they had two groups of patients. One spoke to the doctor in the doctor spoke them in their native language, and the other one was actually using, I think it was an interpreter. And even there, you could see the difference in the patient compliance, how much they adhered to the treatment. That was higher in the one where the doctor was speaking to the patient in the native language directly. And I've really seen that too, because it's not just about the words itself. There's even something more when there is an interaction between the patient and the doctor, that you may be very hard to get by just translating the words itself, or by using a third person as like interpreter. So I found this very interesting topic, and I really believe that this is something that can make a big change for the patient.
It would be interesting to know, though, like, I don't know if the study mentioned it or not, like how much the impact of the interpreter does to a person that doesn't like actual, like, the study was be between a doctor that speaks the patient's native language and an interpreter doing the job for it. There
Yes.
may be like a difference between having an interpreter and to a doctor that doesn't speak the language, or like they use the doctor's native language, or maybe it's like, I don't know if the study mentioned it or not, but I think it's
I
interesting.
don't think so. If I remember correctly, it was quite a long time. I had read about it and I presented it, but it was so interesting because first you think that it's just about translating it, right?
Yeah.
Because that's very important to understand.
Mhm. Yeah.
But there is something more when you actually connect with the person who is actually treating or talking to you, or your doctor itself. So I think it should be very interesting to go deeper into that if there's any other studies made about that. But yeah, it was talked about how they followed the medications and actually improved some of the lab tests related to that. So I I uh, I really find it interesting, this topic. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the thing you're asking about is probably more obvious, like the difference between a doctor that doesn't know the native language of the patient and with an interpreter, because
Probably,
you
yeah.
probably
It's
think
probably more obvious, but I maybe
exactly.
if there was like some data that was like, oh, it's a massive amount of change, or like it's a little bit, because in my mind, like, yes, having an interpreter would be very cool, especially if you don't know the doctor's language.
Exactly.
Sometimes I would feel a little bit, personally at least, a little bit worried all the time where
Mhm.
there's an interpreter, because what if the interpreter messed up and I don't know if they are gonna mess up or anything, because there's like an extra layer of
Mhm.
mistakes that could happen. And of course, it's like, again, if I were to go like here in Germany, where my German is not that good, and suddenly an Italian translator is there, I would be jumping with joy. Um, I would be like super happy because my German is very bad. But when it comes to that like middle level where like you could technically describe yourself, not maybe with this proficiency of a
Yeah.
native, like a super fluent, but like enough where I could at least give my direct thoughts, like let's say French. Maybe I'm like, is it really necessary to have a native? I could just try and speak in French and maybe you
Mhm.
try to magically understand what I'm saying instead of
Yes, and I agree with you on that thing, because many times once again it depends what the topic is. If there is something very complicated that you need to be very specific about, make it, I don't know, about a certain disease, or maybe if there's a psychiatric and psychological examination, is even more important with the words. But many times you can use body language, and also you can use some ways to understand each other. Because when I was a medical student in Hungary, it was mandatory to learn medical Hungarian. So we actually learned how to say, where does the pain radiate to the left arm? So everybody learned that sentence, but most of them didn't even know how to respond to a basic question, like a normal everyday language. So it was quite useless. So I think the most important is to be able to communicate, and the technical words are very important, but there is something that we use in our daily life. We are talking, like as a doctor, we talk to a patient as a
yeah.
human being. The way they tell us about their symptoms is not super technical neither. So I think the strongest thing is to be able to understand each other, and the second thing is to, of course, make sure that this is a very important topic to understand what is talking about. But I've also felt that sometimes, that what really does this interpreter help if we already can speak to each other? But once again, it might be this thing about the impact language has, our native language has on ourselves. It makes us feel maybe more relief, comfortable, be able to express ourselves. It's a lot. It's very so many layers of this question, because I also believe that when you're in a country, you should learn the language, because without knowing the language in the country where you're living, uh, you're very limited also, and it will affect the person itself too. But when you are at the doctor, that's not the place where you have to. We just need to help them and need to solve the thing. But I think many times people speak better than they assume or say they do. Also, so it's, yeah.
And it's actually a good thing that you just talked about, like you become more open, you can kind of broaden your horizon too with knowing more languages and connecting better to other people. So it would be interesting for us to know a bit more about when you lived after living abroad and connecting to a lot of people and collecting languages. And when you came back to Sweden, like what was it like for you to return?
So after living 6 years in Hungary, where when I like in the end spoke Hungarian fluently and almost got a new friend every day by speaking Hungarian to Hungarians because they were so surprised that I would be speaking the language because it's very hard and most of the neighboring countries don't even understand it because it's a completely different language group. So I got this positive can I say energy from speaking to them in their language, and I really enjoyed this process. When I came back to Sweden, I missed that feeling of connecting to people in their language and finding a new language. So I learned Russian. So I did the language classes online, went to language cafe, and I used Tandem a lot because it's a great way to connect and practice language with people from all over the world. So I have
Damn
used
right.
it a lot. Yes. And I also started to when I collected more and more languages on YouTube randomly, I found about this polyglot gathering. There is this concept of polyglot and that people are meeting once a year for a conference. And when I was there, I was the first year it was actually during the COVID, so it was online. But I remember that the feeling of entering a room where there were 20 people and none of them were from Sweden or had lived in Sweden or even been to Sweden, but they spoke Swedish in a very high level and they were like, oh, a Swedish person talking to us. So this power of the language and the enthusiasm made me feel like I found my people. So once a year, I used to go to these conferences, and I met people from Sweden also, who also lived in Stockholm. We used to meet sometimes a year to connect again about our passion for languages. And after some years, I felt, why do I need to wait 1 year to meet like-minded people? I'm sure there are a lot of like-minded people here in Stockholm. So I started a group on Meetup called Stockholm Polyglots, and we've been going on since then. And we are today actually an association, non-profit association, and not only meeting with like-minded people who have learned languages, but we also have a goal and a vision to actually give this to the society and show how the power of languages, how we can actually grow, and because we find parts of ourselves through languages, we connect to other people, and uh, and also that language is actually as a bridge between people through their culture and through everything that languages make in us. So I'm very happy about this, having that community, and we usually meet once every second week where we have polyglot evenings, and we you can practice different languages
Yep.
like a language cafe, but 8 or 10 languages at a time, and also an atmosphere where people actually connect through the passion of language. And we also make members have presentation about a language related topic. It can be a language or a culture, any culture related with languages. So it's also a layer of people showing their passion and their identity in our group.
It's so funny because I used to work at a language cafe like before coming here to Tandem, like as one of my first jobs as a student. Yes, I used to work as a language cafe, but it's like in comparison, like it's I can see like what the upper echelon of languages cafe look like. Because for us, it was just like a bunch of students just like talking to each other and like between classes. It wasn't like that crazy, and like the community was kind of small. And seeing like how actual like language cafe style activity or something like that is like growing and growing to this like massive. You say like non-profit or you say with profit? I didn't quite catch that part.
Yeah, so we are a non-profit association.
Non-profit, okay. So
Yes.
like
Yeah.
still becoming like an actual organization and not just a little tiny dingy cafe inside a university. It's like wow. Wow.
Yeah, and I love going to language cafes. That's how I also improved my Russian because I met a lot of also it was usually here we have a lot of this two languages. So you have Swedish Russian or Swedish Italian. So a lot of
Right.
people go to these, and I got new friends from that. I could speak to them in their language, so I actually connected. You see a language as your friends, right? The language of Alieg or of the other people I know. But I think that this whole thing about our community is more than just practicing a language. It's a community where we actually inspire each other, and the older layer also of doing things in society. So already after half a year, we got contacted by a Swedish television. They made a program about language learning. It was a challenge for a guy who had to learn Spanish in 1 month with no previous knowledge. And they contacted us and asked if he could be in one of our polyglot evenings at the Spanish table. So it was really fun. I actually spoke to him also. He actually learned a lot in 2 weeks. And it was interesting to see how you could actually speed up your language learning to a certain level within a short period of time. And then also we have been doing things in the society at the library where in November they had once a year. They have a topic about multilingualism in children, and we had workshops for kids to practice different languages. We also were at something called Järvaveckan. It's a summit. It's a big summit here in Stockholm where
Mhm.
talk about integration and inclusion, and where there are a lot of politicians and non-profit association are there. And we also had a table there in the tent talking about languages, how that actually is important in our society to be taken importance, how you can actually connect to each other.
There's a lot of different developments that you can take. Like, congratulations on all the amount of activities that you get to do. Like, so yeah, extremely impressive, and I'm so happy that you managed to find this community that like can give such a much like a lot more than a normal classroom. You know.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
And that was, I mean, you already kind of answered the next question we were like about to ask you about what else could a language community give students or language learners that a class can't. But you already talked about it, like this community feeling and like all the other events and all the importance of language and the exchange. So that's very different from a typical language class where you might sit with a textbook and learn the language from there.
Yes, and also what we want to do is to also have this layer of how we can guide or help each other, like mentor each other, because there's another aspect of language learning. Because sometimes you just feel that you're staying on a certain level and don't improve, and having somebody who hold you accountable or talk to you about it, and like a small like peer support is also some things that we would like to implement in our community. Um, yeah, so there's a lot of things we can do when we are together as a group.
Yeah, and like this sort of group feeling, though, it can really like explode into a much broader look into the world of languages because we're approaching our last couple of questions of the show. And usually when it comes to this part, we like to take it back. We like to kind of go a little bit more broad, a little bit more philosophical, I guess, about languages. So looking across all of your, your wonderful journey, the hospital and the patients, your adventures in Hungary, all of the connections that you've made. Like, what do you think, like, language is for, like, beyond the practicality of languages?
Yeah. I think a language is not only about communication, and we already talked about it, but I think it has a much deeper sense what it is because it's part of our identities, and it also gives us access to people, to the culture, and even to ourselves. Because by learning languages, we found things that in ourselves that we maybe didn't wouldn't discover. So it's a way to connect with the people and to yourself at the same time, which actually makes you uh, more as a human. There is actually a Hungarian saying that I every time on my or polyglot evening say. It's for the Hungarian speakers out there. It's annyi ember vagy, ahány nyelvet beszélsz. You are as many human beings as the languages you speak. I think that's
I could make an
summarizes this.
I could make an entire thesis about personality changes between languages, but I don't think we have the time to go through all of it because I feel it a lot and a lot, and this only applies for like 3 languages. Imagine like putting for like 7. So
Yeah.
it's like But yeah, I do think that there's a lot of value in that saying, and it's very powerful, at least for myself. I don't know about anybody else, but I really
It is. But maybe for the listeners here at the podcast who don't feel it yet because they're not like fluent in several languages
they're
yet.
not a language guy, I guess.
Exactly. They don't feel like they are the language type. What would you want them to hear?
Language is much more than the thing that you learned in school or they taught you in school, because maybe you didn't learn it. Actually, I used to say that in Hungarian, or like they taught me, I didn't learn it. So this is something you acquire, and you should do it because of just a passion of how much it gives you. It's not just for your CV. It's something that makes you grow, and it takes you to other places, even not physically going there. It's almost the same feeling. So when I speak to the different languages, I feel like I get another perspective of my surroundings, of my daily life, of where I am in the world right now. And that also connects back to me as a child, daydreaming and coming to different new worlds. And actually, language has this powerful thing with it. So don't uh, don't ever think that you are not something, because you can be anything, and language actually make you believe that.
Yes. Yeah. And next time I'm going to a doctor, if he doesn't speak 7 languages, I'm leaving. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. No, no. In general, yeah, like you follow your dreams. No, but in general, yeah, like as I said a lot in this show, every time it's like you are way better than you think, and learning a language is not a blocker that you need to like overcome with like that only a lot some people are allowed to go. Everybody can learn a language if you put your mind to it. Everybody, if you have the passion for it, that's like a great, the great passion, a great environment, and just the drive, because it is not something that you do overnight. Let's just put that clear. It's not something that you do
Yes.
overnight. It's like going to the gym. You have to do the exercise. You have to change a little bit of your lifestyle sometimes, but it is accessible for everybody, and everybody can have access to it.
It is a marathon, not a sprint.
It is a marathon, not a sprint. Wow.
Yes.
We got the poet and the doctor as well. So, but with that, I think those are perfect words to summarize this entire episode of the Connected by Language podcast. Thank you, Jonatan, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And for all the people that are interested in learning more about Stockholm Polyglots or all the projects that you're working on, is there like a specific link or resource that people can connect you with? Like,
Yeah, Instagram, Facebook, Stockholm Polyglots. Yeah, and we also already started with a YouTube channel, Stockholm Polyglots, where I already put up an intro video where I
nice.
tell about our community and what we are doing. And we'll start to put up some more videos showing morely the energy about from our events, and also show how there is a vibrant language community here in Stockholm.
Wow, that's phenomenal to hear. I will put all of the necessary links in the description below, so feel free to just check it out and follow this phenomenal scene that is just brewing. But again, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining in, and for you guys watching at home. Thank you guys for watching this great episode of the Connected by Language podcast. Are you guys going to the doctor? And if you do, what languages do you speak to them? Let us know in the comment. Don't worry, you don't have to break like confidentiality between your doctor. That's not the place for it. We just care about the language, not what the actual diagnosis is. But in general, yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please follow us and subscribe, and like the video if you're on YouTube, or like leave us a little comment about your little adventures. But I mean, I guess until then, who else is gonna come up on the Connected by Language podcast and talk about their join? I've been your host, Michele. I've been joined by my co-host,
Michelle.
and I guess we're gonna see you on the next episode, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
See you next time.
see ya.
Bye.